I was thinking. Manners and minding your manners and manning your mind to mind your manners is something that I think is probably seen as very British. And if you're not a British or maybe Australian or New Zealand person, resident or someone seeking asylum in those countries, good luck with that by the way, you might think I'm going to talk about how polite the British are, but I can tell you that notion is wrong for two reasons. Firstly, British is not synonymous with English, and the cliched English gentleman flopping about over himself like some buck-toothed, air-filled plastic wavy man, the likes of which you might see outside of Hendrix used tyres. And secondly, I think England, or rather Britain, because they both basically are the same, is one of the least polite countries in the world. There's a penchant among Johnny foreigners to think the English, and I'm English, don't you know, are quite literal in what they say. And specific examples cited typically by confused Yankees with a Q, walking around with knee-high white socks and all-terrain sandals, is that the Britishers really mean they're sorry when they use the word sorry. They mix up one another's bowler hats and they say they're sorry, they glance at each other across the street and there's another one, it's so common it's practically a greeting. But really, in Englandshire, sorry essentially means, I do not intend to immediately harm you, as a failure to appear apologetic probably means you're off in a state and your electronic tag is sitting on the bed of an aunt who is younger than you and also a distant cousin, with hair curlers and leg hair fused to it. And yes, there will be blood. And by the way, I'm sorry for characterising any Americans as dressing like a fat, balding 50-year-old sex tourist in Thailand, as I know that's a stereotype, and I think Americans are probably some of the most polite people in the world, as are Germans who almost seem to jump into their own cliché quite readily, like Fallschirmjäger parachuting into 1941 Crete, as World War II apologists and all-round nice guys now, hell-bent on being nice to everyone to make up for that period of mismanaged foreign policy that went so badly wrong. So in 50 years, maybe the US will be full of people being really super nice, especially to North Koreans who Americans will no doubt stop in the street and thank for doing a jolly nice firework display during the War of Liberation. And I've gone off topic now, haven't I? Maybe I'm no authority, I've never mastered saying how are you when someone says how are you. If you didn't want to know about my rash, why did you ask? What's this shaky hands? It's our rash now, or fruit. British manners, and I say British because the UK includes Northern Ireland, and I think it's quite a push as it is, including Scotland in this hypothetical cliché, probably have only been comparatively stiff for the last 200 years or so, what with Queen Victoria reigning like a cross between Grumpy Cat and Kathy Bates, or should that be Kathy Burke? Anyway, Queen Victoria had a rigidifying effect on her dominion after her husband died, so maybe that and the necessity of formal condescension in the ruling of peoples who had recently been introduced to gunpowder and R43Z forms is to blame. I'm not really sure I believe that the British are particularly passive-aggressive either, but rather active-aggressive, and I know I would certainly be bureaucratized into that category, as I ain't never killed a man who didn't deserve it. I remember I was waiting for a train at a very crowded station and there was a very tall man right next to me who started looking at me as if I'd thrown away his aunt's perfectly good hair curlers. And when I asked him what was wrong, he said I'd roll my suitcase, which admittedly was very heavy as I was a bowling ball salesman at the time, right over his foot. He refused to accept my apology or that I wasn't aware that I'd roll my enormous suitcase over his Hummels. I apologised profusely and felt so sorry I even got into the same carriage as him, stood right next to him, and kept apologising to him every 10 seconds or so as if I'd just remembered that I'd behaved so appallingly, hoping that he'd see that now the memory of me running over his foot was so embedded in my head it would surely change my understanding of existence and myself forever, his initial anger turning into a sort of mixed emotion that comes from believing that yes, you could take the bowling ball salesman next to you in a straight fight, but if anyone on this carriage has a diving knife with a compressed air canister inside it, designed to explode blood vessels when plunged inside an attacking shark, it's this weirdo. I even blew him a little kiss when I reached my stop. Now that's how you do passive aggression, fool. Yet despite my own best efforts to alienate those around me, there is a persistent belief in English manners and politeness, clearly propagated by people who've never tried to buy anything or been to a restaurant in the UK. A workable if not decent minimum wage for waitstaff and shop attendants means they don't need the pennies they'd get from actually being nice, and the accessibility to education means they really do think and probably are better than the jobs they're in. Damn you, social mobility. Just a thought. I remember I had a job stacking shelves once and a man came in and gave me a cigar of which I was initially suspicious, but then I kind of decided